Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I got a couple of new release films that I watched, and they were both interesting each in their own way. One of them is more interesting and more entertaining than the other. I've kind of got an insight into the one that was less entertaining, which sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole of trying to understand that particular genre of movie. So let's get started with the other movie, an Australian film, the sequel to a movie from a couple of years ago called The Dry, based on novels by Jane Harper, starring Eric Bana as an Australian Federal Police detective called Aaron Falk. The Dry was really great. I liked it a lot. Directed by Robert Connolly and adapted by Robert Connolly from the original novel. There are 3 novels with Aaron Falk in them. Third one has yet to be made into a movie. In the second movie, Force of Nature, Aaron Falk is brought into an investigation. 5 women take part in a corporate hike out in the mountains northeast of Melbourne in what is basically a temperate rainforest. One of them is a whistleblower called Alice, played by Anna Torv, and she has a thumb drive full of data to give to Aaron Falk about the money laundering the company she works for, a financial institution, is doing. She disappears on the hike. The other 4 women emerged from the bush. One of them has been bitten by a spider. They've been lost and disoriented for a couple of days. They come back and a search begins for Alice. And because Aaron and his partner Carmen are using Alice as an informant, they go up to help out with the search and start debriefing the women who are on the hike and trying to find out what happened to Alice. Force of Nature has a very different look to The Dry. The Dry takes place in the Wimmera area of northwestern Victoria during a drought, so it's dry, it's parched, it's sunlit, whereas Force of Nature, things are dark and rainy and gloomy and mountainous. So Aaron has to find out what happened to Alice, why it happened to Alice, where the thumb drive is, and he also has to deal with memories of his own mother being lost in the same mountains when he was a young boy. And for some reason, like The Dry, it has to link back into Aaron's past, which is possibly a weakness in the movie. It'd be nice to see him do an investigation where it doesn't in some way relate to his younger life. He'd be stretching credibility to do it a third time, should the third of the books, Exiles, be made into a movie in the future. This one isn't as good as The Dry. It does have a great cast. We have Deborah Lee Furness as the corporate leader who takes them on the hike, who works with her husband, played by Richard Roxburgh, who's a total piece of shit. We also have Jacqueline McKenzie playing Carmen, Barron's Australian Federal Police partner, and Jacqueline McKenzie is good in this one. It's a supporting role, but quite solid. We have a number of other actors, including Robin McLeavy, who do a really good job of giving us grounded characters here. And Anna Torv's Alice is an incredibly good character. She is not a good person. She's a narcissist, she's a thief, she's unreliable. The whole movie revolves around finding her and finding what she did with the data she's supposed to give to Aaron. Deborah Lee Furness, who used to be Mrs. Wolverine until she got better, is good as the corporate leader. She gives us some interesting emotional beats as her character Jill. It's a well-written movie, and the locations mostly filmed around the Otways in southwestern Victoria, an area I know really well. I've driven around there a number of times, and every time I drive around there, I seem to see wallabies and marsupials on the road at odd hours of the morning. Beautiful part of the state. But the core of the movie is Aaron Falk, played by Eric Bana, who has to be the most melancholy of Australia's movie detectives. In some ways he parallels Jay Swan, the character played in Mystery Road and Goldstone by Aaron Pedersen, though Jay has his own backgrounds which are deeply embedded in the disenfranchisement of First Nations people. Aaron is a sensitive guy with ghosts in his past, working as a federal policeman. He's a good investigator, he's an empathic interviewer to the people he talks to, and yet he is quite ambivalent about the things he needs to do his job. It's a complex character, and Eric Bana is the perfect guy for this kind of thing. He hits the plot beats well. His character is very much show not tell, but there is a beautiful moment in this where he confronts the head of the financial institution, played by Richard Roxburgh, a guy called Daniel Bailey, who has all the corporate rich man tropes that we hate, and he expresses them to Aaron. And then Eric Bana's Aaron calls him out on his bullshit, calls him out on the fact that he is laundering money and taking it and stealing it basically from the taxpayers. And there's a nice moment where Aaron unleashes his rage and his class-based rage against this rich, entitled arsehole. Well, I like that. But still, it's very much a lesser movie than the first one. I like the mystery. I like the resolution of the mystery. I like the fact that several people are involved in the mystery and that the resolution makes sense. There isn't a flaw in the resolution to this mystery about what happened to Alice, why and where. It works really well. One of the things the original novel does and the movie is it uses some very familiar things from real life crime cases. There is a serial killer who in the past has worked in these mountain ranges, and there are a number of missing people whose bodies were never found. And part of that mystery gets resolved in the movie and in the book in a fictional context, which parallels the Ivan Milat murders in New South Wales in the 1980s. Now, I will always support Australian film. I like this one. Possibly has too much of Aaron's backstory in the movie because the thrust of the narrative isn't about that. And we know Aaron Falk, the character from The Dry. And so we don't necessarily need for his motivation to be partly the fact that he had a personal experience in the same mountains as a child. It can be his sense of justice because we know he has a strong one from the first movie, which I'd say is the weakness to it. But overall, if you want a good, solid mystery movie, Force of Nature is the one you want because it showcases some of our best actors. The plot resolves itself wonderfully. The mystery is interesting. The characters are complex. There's not goodies versus baddies very much, apart from Aaron, who is our viewpoint character in this, and to a lesser extent Carmen, though Carmen is a lot more cynical about the people she's dealing with while the investigation goes on. And rightly so, she's a bad cop to Aaron's good cop in a sense, but he is being genuine when he is the good cop. So I watched that and enjoyed it. And I recommend it with those few provisos that I mentioned. Second movie is a superhero movie, Madam Web, starring Dakota Johnson, based on Marvel Comics. This is part of the Sony Columbia Pictures Marvel Universe. It's not the MCU. It's called the Sony Spider-Man Universe by some people, the SSU, which doesn't sound right. Directed by S.J. Clarkson, who was a writer and a television director before this. This is her first feature film. And it tells the story of Cassandra Webb, who is a New York City ambulance driver, a paramedic, in 2003. Now, the trailers to this movie don't tell you it's set in 2003. And it's a 21-year-old story, but it is for a reason.
A week ago, I spent my life racing against time.
I'm gonna help you out today, okay?
Trying to save people who were running out of it. Jesse! Until one moment changed everything.
Cassandra's a very good paramedic, but she's socially isolated and she is a bit of a recluse. Her partner Ben, played by Adam Scott, is more outgoing. He has he's engaged, he's got a sister who's pregnant. He has some relationship to Spider-Man, which you can guess by his first name. So while they're doing their paramedic stuff in New York City, Cassandra lives in Brooklyn because it's 2003 and working people could still afford to live in Brooklyn at the time. And she starts having weird hallucinations. She starts looping in time, seeing things that haven't happened yet. And she thinks that she's going mad. She isn't. The pre-credit sequence of the movie tells us what's going on and the unusual circumstances of her birth, which I'm not going to spoil for you. And as time goes on and as these hallucinations get worse and weirder, she finds out that she can use these precognitive moments to change what is going to happen. And she finds one of the things she has to do is rescue 3 young women on a train who are all linked in the future because they are future iterations of Spider-Woman. Bear with me on this. I'm going to give you what I think of the movie after I tell you this stuff. So she rescues them from a guy called Ezekiel Sims, played by Tahar Rahim, who knew her mother before her birth and who has a special spider from the Peruvian jungle which gives people various kinds of superpowers. In his case, he can look forward in time and he sees that these 3 teenage young women 20 years from now are going to kill him, so he wants to kill them in the present day, being 2003, because That way they won't kill him in the future. Cassandra using these precognitive abilities helps them, and you get the usual superhero narrative. I'm not going to spoil beyond that. Madam Web is a character that's been in Marvel Comics since 1980. In the comics, she is a much older woman, which is probably why the movie is set 21 years in the past. She's blind, she is disabled, she has myasthenia gravis, which is a degenerative neurological disorder which affects the eyes and the muscles and the bones and everything. And the superpowers in the comics are clairvoyance, precognition, telepathy, and she is a gifted intellect and a good strategist. Problem is, Dakota Johnson doesn't give us any of this in the movie. Dakota Johnson is a third-generation Nepo baby. Her grandmother was Tippi Hedren, or still is, Tippi Hedren. Her mother is Melanie Griffith, her father is Don Johnson, and she has a career in movies because she is a Nepo baby. Problem is, she seems very disengaged from the character she's playing. There's a flattened effect there which really doesn't work. One of the things you need in any superhero movie, particularly when you're telling an origin story of a very obscure and kind of a bleak superhero, you need charisma in the leading actor. You need that special riz that Robert Downey Jr. had, Chris Hemsworth had. You needed Chris Evans kind of charisma. You need Henry Cavill charisma. You don't need Dakota Johnson level of charisma. She really seems to do this. It feels like she's done this movie because she's contractually obligated to do it. And that's a weakness. That viewpoint character, whether they're a young actor, whether they're an older actor, whoever they are, they have to have that special sparkle that makes you feel for the character. She unfortunately lacks it. The younger actresses have a lot more of that. Sydney Sweeney is one of them. Isabella Merced and Celeste O'Connor, playing the three characters, Julia, Anya and Matty, have a lot more of that. They know what kind of movies it is and they play to that, as does Adam Scott playing Ben, her partner in The Ambulance. Rahat Tahim playing Ezekiel Sims is not very good at all. The other side of a good superhero movie is you need a villain who is at least as charismatic as the hero. You need that kind of antagonism of people's attention. You don't get that. The precognitive moments in the movie are shot very well. The director does a good job of it. What the problem is they're not edited very well. They're not edited in a way that really draws our attention to the bits that need to have our attention. I don't know the reasons for that, but the editing on that is weak. But here's the thing that interests me. Male reviewers have given it an overwhelmingly bad set of reviews. People have saved their special pejorative terms to review this movie. And overwhelmingly, the people who have given it a 1 out of 5 and things like that are male reviewers. And the thing that I flashed on after I watched this movie, and I was on my way home, is male superhero movie fans don't deal well with superhero movies for which male superhero movie fans are not necessarily the target audience. It's quite clear that Sony wanted to aim this movie at younger female viewers. They were bad at getting that kind of an audience, but that seems to be the audience they were shooting for. And that cognitive dissonance that male superhero movie fans have over a movie where they're not the target audience, they're not the people who get all the jollies, really knocked this movie down further than it should be. It's a much better movie than Morbius. It's not a great movie, it's not even a particularly good superhero movie, but it is better than Morbius. That cognitive dissonance of male superhero movie fans not liking it because it isn't aimed at them is one of the main issues. The same thing happened with the Marvels, the same thing happened to a certain extent with Eternals, same thing happened to a slight extent with Wonder Woman, though Gal Gadot isn't particularly a great actress, so there is that problem as well. What I'm going to try to do when I review superhero movies in the future, and I probably will, is try to take into account who the target audience is and recognise when I am not it. I think that's the honest way to review these kind of movies and to be fair with them. I don't want to tear this movie down. I wanted it to be better. I kind of like narrative threads that pull through the movie like a spiderweb. It could have been done better and should have been done better, and it wouldn't have cost more to do it better. The casting is the problem. I think the script, which was done by 4 people, the original script was written by Matt Samaza and Bert Sharpless, who don't have a great track record. And Claire Parker and S.J. Clarkson, the director and her writing partner, came in and tried to fix things up. I think that was a good move, but I think the original stuff crippled what could have been a better superhero movie than it was. Now, for me, the other weird thing about the film was, for me, the idea that 2003 is somewhat distant past is a bit of a headcanon. It's true, but it feels like it was 3 weeks ago. And I kind of am amused by that. This could have been the start of a new cycle of Sony Spider-Man universe movies. And it could have linked into the main Spider-Man thread, again another web reference, of future Spider-Man movies. And Brad probably should have. And I think that there's a possibility that will. But it's weakened by a number of things, one of which is product placement. There's way too many Pepsi product placements in this movie. And it feels a bit like we see too many of the cogs of Sony and Columbia Pictures trying to build on the intellectual properties that they bought off Marvel decades ago and still retain the rights to, which is Spider-Man to a certain extent and Spider-Man adjacent characters. If you're going to do this sort of stuff, don't let the man behind the curtain show too much. That's going to weaken what you're doing, and I think they let the man behind the curtain show too much in this. You can see the way they're aiming things. You see the way they're kind of pushing their intellectual property, bending it out of shape and maybe making it less likely to manifest what they wanted to manifest in the future. But for me, the big weakness is Dakota Johnson. She may be good in certain kinds of roles and she may become a better actress in the future. She's only 34. This movie doesn't seem like it got 100% from her. It was just a shame because we've seen what Iron Man did for Robert Downey Jr. and how it kickstarted his career when he was a punchline in talk show monologues. And I was kind of thinking, had they got a more dedicated and a better actress to play the lead role, this movie could have been so much more. I'm enough of a superhero movie fan to wish it was so much more, but it's not a great superhero movie. And I think if Sony is going to continue the Sony Spider-Man universe in the future, they may need to get somebody to lead that particular project who knows what the hell they're doing and is willing to reboot the whole thing in a creative and imaginative way. Now, we do have another movie in the SSU coming up, Kraven the Hunter, with Aaron Taylor Johnson. I don't know whether that's going to be any good or not. I don't want to see superhero movies fail. I'm a superhero movie fan. It will take a certain amount of rework to save this particular franchise from just ending up in the dustbin of history. So there's the two movies I saw recently. One I liked a lot. One I wished was better. And I think that's the attitude I'm going to try to take this year. And when a movie fails, I'm going to try to think of the ways it could have been better. Because it's easy to just shit can a movie. It's easy to throw bricks at it. It's a little more difficult to work out what went wrong and what we wish was better. And I think that's the approach I'm going to try to take this year. Might not always do it, but I will try to do it. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next up, I've got a couple of interesting things for the midweek video. Then, of course, we roll back into Science Fiction Saturday on the weekend. And until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some spider movies, watch some other movies. And I'll catch you next time.